Good evening. Welcome to Bedtime Stories. This reading covers an extremely disturbing subject matter. It's intended for mature audiences only. May 1966, Newark, New Jersey. Transformed into her night persona, Renee bore absolutely no resemblance to her former self. She looked nothing like the 14-year-old who sat in the front pew of her godfather's church each Sunday with a delicate church bonnet upon her neatly braided hair and a little patent leather bag clutched in her hand. She was dressed in a sapphire blue outfit she'd taken out of her mother's closet that was far too mature for a 14-year-old, with a pair of super high heels she'd stolen from one of the department stores downtown Newark. With her thick hair fashioned in a sophisticated French roll, Renee resembled a woman 10 years her senior and ripe for the picking. Her destination was the No Name Bar, located on Lyons Avenue, less than a block away from her parents' Wainwright Street home. Renee could hear the music as soon as she rounded the corner. It called to her, pulsing within her body and electrifying something deep inside of her. There was not one free parking space on either side of the street in front of the bar. Cars were double parked with radios blaring popular tunes. People were laughing and having a good time. Renee saw her boyfriend Billy's black on black deuce. She picked up her pace the best she could in her stolen high heels. She hurried over to the car with a big Kool-Aid smile plastered on her face. She couldn't hide her disappointment when she saw who was sitting behind the wheel. Billy's best friend, Tony Columbus, a blond-haired, blue-eyed white boy who just happened to be the mayor's ne'er-do-well son, rolled down the window, releasing a billow of pungent smoke. "Hey, Tony," she said, slightly out of breath. "Where's Billy?" Her eyes roamed the nearby vicinity in search of the man she had repeatedly lied to her parents in order to spend time with. "Well, hello back at you, young stuff," Tony said. "Does your Bible-toting pappy know you out this late at night?" he asked playfully. Renee hated it when white people tried to act like they were black, and she hated it even more that Billy referred to her father as somebody's pappy like he was a slave or something. Her daddy always said, "Give white folks an inch and they take a daggone mile." Tony's eyes raked her from head to toe. "It ain't safe for pretty little church girls like you to be out with us sinners," he added. Renee merely rolled her eyes in response to Tony's comments. If anybody should keep their ass in the house, it was him. He'd already done some time in Annandale, and here he was smoking weed and hanging out where he had no business while he was still on probation. That was just plain stupid. But she guessed you could do anything you want if you were white and your parents have enough cash. "There's some bad people out here who might want to eat a little girl like you up," he said, holding her gaze. This time Renee looked away. She didn't know what to say to that, but his words made her feel real funny inside. Determined to get a straight answer to her question, she asked, "Do you know where Billy is or not?" with her hands on her slender hips and a sassy look in her eyes. "Maybe," was Tony's non-committal response. At this point, Renee was clearly exasperated. She hadn't climbed out of the bedroom window in her father's house to waste time doing a fucking back and forth routine with white boy Tony. She was horny as hell and she needed to see her man. "Come on now, Tony, you know I'm on a short leash and my time is limited. Either you know where he is or you don't." Tony raised a joint to his lips and took a deep, leisurely drag. "Tell you what, why don't you get in the car? Let me get your head straight, and then I'll tell you where Brother Bill is." That was incentive enough for Renee to get in the car. Tony leaned toward her to give her a shotgun as soon as she closed the passenger door behind her. She inhaled deeply, experiencing euphoria the second she exhaled. Tony stayed close enough for Renee to smell the combination of weed and peppermint on his breath. He said, "You're so pretty," before running his finger down the side of Renee's face. Renee froze. She knew Tony dug her. She could tell by the way he looked at her when he thought nobody else was looking. like he wanted to eat her up or something. She also knew he would never jeopardize the relationship he had with Billy. They were more than partners in crime. They were best friends. But sometimes, like tonight, Tony would let his guard down and cross that invisible line, and those were the times she felt drawn to him like a moth to a flame. She knew that if she wasn't careful, somebody was going to get burnt. Sensing he was making her uncomfortable, Tony immediately backed off. Nodding his head in the direction of the bar, he said, "He's inside handling some business." Renee jumped out of that car like it was on fire. She couldn't help fucking with Tony one last time, though. She knew his eyes were on her. Walking backwards in the direction of the bar, she blew him a kiss. It was okay to play with Tony. He was a nice guy and kind of cute for a white boy, but he wasn't Billy. Less than an hour later, Renee was sitting at a gambling table, nervously wringing her hands. When Billy's friend Barry mentioned one of his runners had dropped over $1,000 at the table, Billy just about lost his mind. He told Renee to stay in the back room while he handled the situation. Renee had seen the outline of a gun in Billy's pocket when he stood to leave. There was a wall clock with a crack in its face right next to the fire exit. Renee's heart pounded in her chest every time the hand on the clock advanced another minute. She was scared. Her parents were early risers. It was getting dangerously close to the time when she had to sneak back into the house. She didn't know what to do. One thing was for sure. If Billy didn't come back soon, she was going to have to slip out the back and explain to him later. She was thinking that maybe she'd leave Billy a note when the door opened and Tony strode in. He closed the door behind him. An alarm was immediately triggered in Renee's sensibilities. Something was off about Tony. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. All she knew was that she didn't feel comfortable being in a back room alone with him. Her basis for discomfort was confirmed when she gave Tony a nervous smile, which he didn't return. "If you're looking for Billy, he's out in the bar taking care of a situation with one of the guys who works for him," she rambled nervously. "I don't know why the hell I'm nervous," she thought. "Hell, this is Tony, my man's best friend." But she was nervous. "I'm not looking for Billy," Tony snapped. "I know exactly where he is. And from the sound of things, he's going to be tied up for quite some time." As if Tony had personally timed it, Renee heard the sound of a made-for-primetime TV free-for-all, with accompanying grunts, groans, and broken glass coming from the bar proper. Tony locked the door behind him. The loud click of the lock engaging was ominous. He said, "I was looking for you, Renee," as he walked toward her like a jungle beast about to pounce. "And I am so glad I found you." Renee felt vulnerable sitting, so she stood. She realized her mistake when Tony backed her up against the pool table. Right about now, Renee looked every bit of her 14 years of age and seriously in need of her mama. She said, "You're scaring me, Tony," in a shaking voice with quivering lips. She didn't need to tell Tony she was scared. It hit his nose the minute he walked through the door. He could smell the stink of fear all over her. He could see it. The pulse at the base of her slender neck was racing like a wounded bird. Her eyes were huge with fear. Tony knew she could feel his power. He pinned her up against the pool table, grinding his pelvis against her to increase her discomfort. She could feel how hard he was through the material of his pants. "Didn't I tell you it wasn't safe for pretty little girls like you to be out late at night, baby?" Tony took her face in his hand and drew her close enough to kiss her. She turned her face away from his kiss. "Something bad is about to happen to you," he whispered in her ear. Her answering whimper stroked his human cock like a tight fist. She couldn't bring herself to move when his hands caressed her face and moved down to her neck. He kneaded the back of her neck with one hand and stroked the front of her neck with his thumb in a circular motion. Suddenly, Tony tightened his grip around Renee's throat, choking her. With no emotion in his eyes, he dispassionately watched Renee's look of horror and pain as the last bit of oxygen threatened to leave her lungs. Her eyes bulged, blood vessels and capillaries burst. She struggled against him, trying to claw his hands off her throat, to kick him away from her, but his superior size and strength kept her firmly trapped between his body and the pool table. Tony waited until her eyes were fixed, and the realization that she was probably going to die and that there was nothing she could do about it sunk in before he let go. And now she was leaning against him like he was her savior, gasping like a woman risen from the bottom of the sea. Bet you wish you kept your little black ass home tonight now, don't you? He asked in Demori's soul, the language of the hells. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm going to do what that punk-ass white boy Tony should have done the first time he saw you. I'm going to have you. It wasn't Tony speaking. It was the demon Tyranny. Her face was awash with tears, and snot ran from her nose as she mouthed the words in anguish. No, please, Tony, don't do this. But no sound came out of her damaged larynx. Her silent plea went unheeded. Tyranny Tony was just getting started. He knew his time was limited, so he had to work fast. When Renee sought to turn away from him, he struck her. The first blow set off a pyrotechnic light show inside her head. He struck her closed fist with the force one would use to fell another man. Blood sprayed out of her busted nose and mouth like an overripe tomato, splashing against the wall, staining her mother's pretty sapphire blue dress in the top of the pool table with bright, unforgiving crimson. Renee would have fallen backwards had it not been for the sheer force of the blow and him holding her up. Hush, he said, squeezing her bloody lips together with one hand and placing a finger up to his lips, indicating she should not speak. A muffled scream sounded deep in her throat when he took the kiss she previously tried to deny him. The sweep of his tongue muted her screams while he took advantage of her inferior strength to push her down on the pool table. And now his face was also covered in blood. Hers. When she went to scream, he struck her again, this time with the back of his hand. He backhanded her not once, not twice, but repeatedly, until his brutal blows at her busted head lolled back and forth like a human punching bag. A voice inside Renee's head screamed, I can't believe this is happening to me. Mommy! Even though it was not more than 10, maybe 15 minutes at most, it felt like it was a forever, like a lifetime. 900 seconds that would change Renee Fuller's life forever. Renee thought about how much trouble she was going to get in when Tony ripped the top of her mother's sapphire blue dress wide open and her dainty little pink bra along with it. Those concerns quickly flew out of the window when Tony smashed her small breasts together with his big, cruel hands. And then Renee experienced a pain so excruciating that she temporarily blacked out. Tyranny suckled on her breast for a few moments before he bit off one of her nipples and spat it on the surface of the pool table. Her brain was still trying to reconcile her body with the agonizing pain when he forced her in position on top of the pool table and pushed the lower part of her dress up around her waist. He held her down with one hand and shoved 3 fingers of it inside of her all the way to the knuckle. His fingernails were long. They sliced her insides. Tyranny uttered the words tight in a voice that was almost unrecognizable as that of a human, and then he was on her, inside her, ruining her. Tyranny rode her like a wild pony, periodically pausing between his vicious thrusts to punch her in the face again and again. The pool table actually slid each time he pounded into her body, grunting like he was some kind of feral animal. It hurt so bad. If only I could black out. Please, God, I can't take no more. The impact was cracking her entire rib cage. The felt from the pool table burned her back. She could feel him inside her stomach, rearranging her organs, pounding against the end of her heart, damaging her, blackening her spirit. When he finally came, it felt like he poured battery acid inside her body. She winced when he pulled out, leaving her to lay in a pool of cum and blood, only to drag her to the floor and throw her down to sodomize her. It's amazing how much abuse the human body can withstand before it shuts down, blacks out, and tells its owner it can't take any more. When it was finally done with her, he said, "If only I had more time to play," while buckling his pants. It had quieted a bit in the bar. It was time for him to leave. Renee looked up, bloody, beaten, and battered, to see the sole of his boot coming down on her head. After that, it was lights out, baby. Tyranny looked at the mess he'd made of that 14-year-old one more time before leaving out the fire exit. My name is Carolyn Evelyn-Holland. I'm the author of the Brothers of the Dark Veil series. This reading was from Book 2, The Realm of Ah. Thank you for listening, and have a good night.